Hello everyone, my name is Chris Calicut and you are listening to the very first edition of the newly rebranded Knockdown Sports Radio. And the good music you're listening to right now comes from the guys from Sanford, North Carolina, my good buddies Rust Honey, their song Inside Looking Out. We want to thank them for allowing us to use that. But like I said, you're listening to the first edition of Knockdown Sports Radio. My name is Chris. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. It is August 1st, 2016. What better day to knock out the first edition of Knockdown on the first day of the month, ladies and gentlemen. Proud to be here and really happy I can get this thing rolling. And glad I can use a really cool interface like Spreaker.com. They have a really nice, easy-to-use interface for podcasters like myself. Very affordable packages as well. Encourage you to look into them if you want to start your own deal. As always, as the CT Sports Report, previously branded, of course, at CT_Sports Report on Twitter, it was sponsored by 2H Brewing. 2H Brewing out of Greensboro, North Carolina. My partner in crime, Cody Teague, his lovely fiancée, Leslie Harris, the newlywed couple about to be there in September, and their good friend, Mr. Phil Howard, having some home brews going on in their home, hence the home brew. Need to get that list of beer of the month from them, but hey, they've got some good stuff going on. I encourage you to check them out on Twitter at 2H Brewing, or you can hit Cody up directly at CRTeague008. That is CRTeague008. Thank you to 2H Brewing for sponsoring the program today. Now, Knockdown Radio, brand new thing, rebranded from the CT Sports Report. What are you going to be listening to? What are you going to be looking for? What's going to be covered? You may have a few questions here and there. First of all, this is going to be a renewed emphasis on pro wrestling. As some of you know, I do have the luck, I'll call it luck. So there's a little bit of skill involved, but probably not a ton. To actually write for WrestlingInc.com, which I believe is the best pro wrestling website out there. Thanks to Raj and those guys for giving me that opportunity. I cover the Cruiserweight Classic and NXT for them on Wednesday nights on their website with the live coverage. I'm also their social media manager, so I live tweet Monday Night Raw, which will be tonight, Tuesday night SmackDown Live, and also their pay-per-views, if there's any on Sunday nights. So you can find all that on WrestlingInc.com or on Twitter at WrestlingInc. But yeah, a renewed focus here on pro wrestling. And I believe I take an analytical and unbiased point of view. Yes, sure, I have my favorites, along with all sports, but an analytical point of view to where you're going to hear some common sense stuff, and you may even hear a hot take here and there. Back at the CT Sports Report, that was our mantra, hot takes and common sense. You decide which is which. We're still going to flow with that type of motto, so hopefully you can tell which is which, but hey, they might bleed in together every now and again. But also, we're going to continue our coverage of all things sports. We just had the MLB trade deadline today. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'll talk a little bit about the WWE brand split and how things are looking for the future. And some basic stories or top stories in the world of sports today with our brand new segment that we'll get to in just a moment. But I wanted to sort of tell you what Knockdown Sports Radio means. Knockdown, you might equate that to, say, wrestling, MMA, UFC, that type of thing. But no, my friends. It is wonderful across the board. You know what? Using a wrestling term, you can knock down a feta, as Enzo Amore would say, a couple fetas. You can knock down a feta from the elbow. You could knock down somebody in wrestling or MMA. And hey, just like Jimmy Walker did in the PGA Championship this week, he knocked down a couple of 9-irons to within striking distance, and as our good buddy SVP would say, useful shot that. But hey, Knockdown Radio, it's a great name for all sports, and we hope you will follow us and enjoy it. So moving right along, what to expect from us here at Knockdown Sports Radio. Like I said, emphasis on pro wrestling, unbiased and analytical stuff, but we're going to continue with all things sports. And one thing I'm really looking forward to is the potential for interviews. And that may be from indie wrestling promotions here in the Carolinas. This show is based out of North Carolina, if you were not familiar with us before. I've got a couple of things in the works for that. But we'd also like to interview local athletes here in our community. And if we're just so lucky that we get our name out there one of these days, we can find a real big name. But hey, I'm looking forward to adding some interviews, some insight, recaps of the major events and all things. You're going to get it all here at Knockdown Sports Radio. We are not a niche podcast, but hey, if you want to get to the wrestling part, feel free to download it and to just skip right over to that part or the other. But we encourage you to download this podcast. We are going to be streaming this live on Spreaker, and also once everything is concluded, we will be spreading this to our YouTube, which is on our Gmail account at Knockdown Sports Radio. Our Twitter, which is rebranded, and I had to keep the underscore, guys. The underscore was my favorite part of the CT underscore Sports Report Twitter handle. So this is at Knockdown underscore Sport. Knockdown underscore Sport. So we'll be sharing that on Facebook as well, which is facebook.com/Knockdown Sports Radio. We really need to build up our viewership and our listeners as we look into more of, possibly getting sponsors for this program. If you have a community-based sports store, sports organization that you want to get out there, if you're an indie wrestling promotion that wants to promote a show or promote a talent, please let us know. We have sponsorship packages available that are very, very affordable, and essentially they cover our expenses for our host, our logo, our website, all that fun stuff. This is basically a labor of love, ladies and gentlemen. This is not to get rich. This is just to possibly cover our expenses. And we may be starting somewhat of a Kickstarter on Patreon.com. Just be on the lookout for that if we do decide to launch that little service. So, let's roll right into the news, ladies and gentlemen. The very first segment, the renamed Pop Tops, if you're Knockdown Radio, has to be the 3 count. The top 3 stories, or 3 of the top stories in sports today. Here we go with count number 1. By the way, 1 count's not used enough in wrestling anymore, but that's a totally different topic for a totally separate show. Jimmy Walker, as I mentioned earlier, nice segue there, wins the PGA Championship at Baltusrol over on Sunday with a score of -14. He was able to hang on and make par on number 18 to hold off the Australian golfer, number 1 in the world right now, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Jason Day. I had the privilege of watching the last 6 or 8 holes of that, and there was some quality stuff. Jimmy Walker did not really crack under pressure for being a first-time major champion. You think maybe his knees would buckle a little bit. He might push one out wide. No such luck for Jason Day, who made an eagle 3 on the par 5 18th just to get within 1 shot of Walker. So Jimmy Walker wins that PGA Championship at Baltusrol at -14. So the Wanamaker Trophy goes home with him. The Olympics start up on Wednesday over in Rio, Brazil. To much chagrin of most of your major athletes in the world. We could talk about the conditions all day of things over in Rio right now, whether that be the economic woes of really hosting this Olympics, the conditions in which the Olympic city, or whatever you want to call it, where the athletes are staying. Not a whole lot of filtered water going on, apparently. Accommodations not exemplary from what I'm hearing. It's a tough situation. You put your bid in with the intention of putting on the best event possible. And then the Olympic Committee, has to reward somebody. And if it's like anybody else, the bid's going to go to the cheapest, the cheapest bidder. Whether that's quality or not. And to me, that's a business practice 101, marketing practice 101, whatever you want to call it. The winner goes to the cheapest bidder. And if that was the case here, then, that's unfortunate, because there's a whole lot of backlash from fans like myself who want to see absolute quality facilities for these athletes who sometimes don't have a chance to go professional in what they do. But, so this is basically their highlight of their career. And you don't want to celebrate somebody's highlight of their career, just in crappy conditions. Pardon my French there. But you don't want to be less than stellar when you host a huge, momentous, monumental event like the Olympics. You want it to be a star-studded field, which for a lot of the sports, your major stars are out. Going back to golf, McIlroy, Spieth, a lot of those guys not showing up. And they're saying that it could be based on their schedules, their health, whatever. They just don't want to go down there and spend time in bad conditions and possibly contract the Zika virus from all the diseased mosquitoes and bugs down there. So, with that said, the Olympics start on Wednesday. They kick off the first couple of days with women's soccer. Then they get into some of your more oddball events, the archery, that kind of thing. But I'm sure NBC Sports will have wall-to-wall coverage of all things Olympics. So be sure to check that out. I know I will tune in as much as I can. All right, the 2 count. Excuse me, that was the 2 count. Number 3, and for the pin. Ichiro, our boy. The Marlins' Ichiro Suzuki inching closer to hit number 3,000 in the major leagues. He goes for the feat this week at Wrigley Field versus the Cubs. He is sitting at 2,998 as we speak. He looks to be starting this week, so I think they're really trying to get him to that monumentous number of 3,000. He really doesn't want to be known as the hit king. Ichiro, if nothing else, seems to be extremely humble. So if you count his hits over in Japan, he's darn near 5,000 hits, which would pretty much surpass the hit king himself, Pete Rose. So I really don't think Ichiro cares about those type of accolades. Now, I'm sure on the inside he's probably burning up a little bit, but let's just put it this way. He's handling it correctly when it comes to interacting with the media and whatnot. So I've enjoyed watching him for the better part of, I guess, a decade or more now. I did not realize I think he's like 41, 42 years old. It only seems like a couple of years ago, well, not a couple, but just a few years ago, that he came up with the Seattle Mariners and spent some time with them, spent a good part of his career. Then the Marlins picked him up just a couple years ago and has used him more of like a utility player. He can play outfield from time to time for you. If you go to an American League stadium, he can DH for you. Mr. Utility, pretty much. You can put him in any role and he'll pretty much succeed. But Ichiro looking for number 3,000 this week. And from one Major League Baseball story to the other, getting to the meat and potatoes of the show here, I want to remind you to check out 2H Brewing on Twitter at 2H Brewing and Wrestling Inc. on Twitter at Wrestling Inc. before we head over to today's meat and potato story. And that is the Major League Baseball trade deadline that happened at 4 p.m. today on August 1st. some big names moving. The Yankees pretty much with a mass exodus of their veteran stars and looking to sort of refresh their lineup a little bit as their season has not really gone up to snuff to what they really want. And that's unfortunate for that franchise. The Yankees want to be perennial powerhouses. They've been built on that for years, and I believe they will continue to be built on that. But right now they're sort of wanting to, I guess, go for a bit of a youth movement, as I am not extremely familiar with some of their pickups, but you'll recognize some of the guys they gave up. One of those guys being Mr. 105 miles per hour himself, Aroldis Chapman. He was traded over to the Cubs for 4 players. Chapman currently has a 2.06 ERA with 21 saves and 50 strikeouts. It's rare that one of his fastballs does not go 103. Now, tell me that you're juicing up the speed guns, the radar guns, whatever. Maybe they're turning them up a notch, recalibrating it to maybe make him look a little bit better. I'm not so sure. But the Cubs picking up a heck of a closer, even though he blew a save on one of his first outings with the Cubs just a couple days ago. But 2.06 ERA with 21 saves, like I said, 50 strikeouts, heck of a ratio there. Aroldis Chapman to the Cubs. Another move by the Yankees, Carlos Beltran has been moved from the Yankees to the Texas Rangers. The Texas Rangers pick up a big bat from the Yankees. Beltran with some nice power numbers, another somewhat aging superstar who had a lot of success in his earlier years, still putting up nice numbers, but a little departure from the Yankees once again. And another departure from the pinstriped gentleman, relief pitcher Andrew Miller, former North Carolina Tar Heel. But the Indians pick up Andrew Miller, which I think was a really nice pickup for them as they make somewhat of a playoff push. And the Yankees also get 4 players back for him. So essentially, the Yankees got about 10 to 12 players for 3 guys. Now, if you're wanting numbers and basing everything on potential, and maybe even shedding a little salary cap at the same time, I think you got a pretty good deal. Now, that's going to be for the future, not the right now, as the Yankees sit about 500 on their record so far this season. Some other notable transactions as the deadline came to a close. The Atlanta Braves, or as we affectionately call them now, the Barbs, pretty much bottom of the barrel in Major League Baseball right now, opening up a new ballpark next year, and I guess they had to pick up a couple names for them to sell tickets. They picked up Matt Kemp from the Padres for third baseman Hector Olivera. Olivera, who was a quality prospect and good player for the Braves, will be returning very, very soon from an 82-game suspension for a domestic violence dispute last year. So I guess the Padres saying they're okay with the baggage. But the Braves picking up a big bat with this one. 262 batting average for Matt Kemp so far this year. 23 home runs. And with this stat, a shout out to Cody Teague. 69 RBIs. Alrighty, another big bat moving locales. That's Jay Bruce from the Cincinnati Reds. Moving over to the New York Mets. The Mets falling from grace right now in the National League East. The Marlins looking a little better. But, the Nationals, same thing, Nationals. But Jay Bruce is heading to the Mets. Flushing, New York needed a clutch bat as they look to push for the playoffs. So I believe the Mets got that in Jay Bruce, a perennial powerhouse in the power stats for sure. Dodgers are getting Josh Reddick, another good player from the Oakland A's. They also picked up a very good starting pitcher, if I remember correctly, as well with that deal. And you know what? That are some of your major players moving teams right here at the MLB trade deadline. Like I said, that finished up at 4 p.m. Eastern Time on the East Coast on August 1st. So be looking out for those new guys in their new uniforms in the coming days as they sort out all the medical paperwork and see how those teams are affected as they move forward. I wouldn't expect the Yankees to do a whole lot here. Like I said, with the youth movement, the Mets had a nice pickup there. Indians, another nice pickup. Braves, they might have just added a little padding and a couple of more season tickets. But to that extent, that's pretty much it for this year, really the next 2 to 3 years. And what bothers me here is the Braves have the best farm system in baseball. It's been voted top 3 farm system for like the last 5 years. And what stinks is we're giving up some of those really good farm guys to get okay names. We're not using it to our advantage. And me being a Braves fan from the southeastern United States, I claim to be unbiased. This is what I'm going to be slightly biased on. They need to hold on to those guys and mature those guys, bring them up as a unit, and pretty much, hey, play your AAA team as if they're not already with a couple of overpaid veterans. But I would really like to see the Braves bounce back in the next couple of years. As we move ahead to the emphasis of today's program, the WWE brand split. WWE announced just a few weeks ago that they would officially go to 2 different unique brands, and SmackDown, the secondary brand, would be moving from Thursday night taped to a live Tuesday night show to basically give it the equivalent of a live Monday Night Raw. Now, Raw is still 3 hours. SmackDown is 2 hours. So to me, SmackDown is the much more palatable show, without even turning on the television. 3 hours for wrestling, unless it's a very special event, like a pay-per-view that you've built up to for 4 to 6 weeks. A WrestleMania and SummerSlam probably going to be 4 hours. But 3 hours on a weekly show is just too darn much. It puts too much pressure on the talent, too much pressure on the creative writing team, which, for lack of a better word, has been struggling, I would say, the past couple of years, and really more so recently. So, to get those advertising dollars from NBC Universal and the USA Network, they really wanted to put SmackDown on the same pedestal as Raw. So they moved it to Tuesday nights and made it live with what they call unique rosters. And I will give them that. They're unique, all right. Let's talk a little bit about Monday Night Raw. They had a WWE draft 2 Tuesdays ago on the very first SmackDown Live, which did good numbers, by the way, to settle who is going where on the roster. So let's run down a couple of the top stars here for Monday Night Raw. Brock Lesnar, who returns at tonight's Raw, hopefully alongside Paul Heyman, who, if you have not heard, is his contract ran out a couple of months ago and is rumored via Wrestling Inc. to have re-signed a new deal so he could appear alongside his client, Brock Lesnar. So Brock Lesnar returns tonight on Monday Night Raw. But the only issue with Brock Lesnar as one of your top picks is, and I think he went number 9 overall, he's never there. He has a limited appearance contract. He's there for the big shows. He's going to be facing Randy Orton at SummerSlam, and which will probably one of the co-main events. I assume there's probably going to be 3, maybe 4-ish semi-mains, co-main events of SummerSlam. It's going to be a really stacked card, and you should be on your second best pay-per-view of the year. But Brock Lesnar also coming off not really a suspension, and WWE said he's not going to be suspended, but possible USADA violations during his UFC fight at UFC 200, and he was pretty much docked for an anti-estrogen drug or an estrogen inhibitor, which people typically use when they come off a cycle of some sort of performance enhancer or steroid. So Brock Lesnar, a little controversy surrounding him right now, and like I said, part-time star, so even though he's a big draw and a main headline, you're not going to have him at your fingertips, 10 months out of the year. Raw had the number 1 overall pick, and they took Seth Rollins, who at the time had just lost his WWE Championship. And that was to Dean Ambrose, your current WWE Champion. Seth Rollins is a really good guy. He has exhibited the ability to play a face within the Shield whenever he was a part of that. And he's also displayed a face type of character when he was in NXT. He was the very first NXT champion. But here lately, he's been the authorities' lackey, for a lack of a better term. While he's dramatically improved on the microphone, sort of that snarky, narcissistic type of heel, he's going to be an asset to the company for many, many years to come. And I like that as their top overall draft pick. Which leads me to their other second round choice, who went just below or just above Brock Lesnar, former WWE champion Roman Reigns. Whether you love him, whether you hate him, I guess he still gets a reaction. And I think that's kind of the point of his character right now, is he's getting somewhat of the John Cena pop. He has the women and some of the children, yay, and guys like myself and your other grown type of gentleman with the boo. Now right now he's getting more like 80% boos, 20% cheers, which to me would say, hey, go ahead, turn him heel. But God bless Vince McMahon and his senility, being a 70-plus-year-old man trying to run a modern company. He sees a big dude with a good look, big muscles, the long hair, the powerful moveset, albeit somewhat limited. He's going to push him as a face. And what killed him as a face is WWE pushed him down our throats, consistently. There was no stopping. It was incessant. Roman Reigns then basically got turned on by the WWE Universe. And then he's been getting type of reactions from there on out. Right now, he's kind of out of the title picture. I would be interested to see what his role is tonight on Monday Night Raw and how they book him moving forward. Are they going to try to rebuild him? Or are they going to sort of keep him on the top of the card just in a slightly lesser role? A couple of their top women's draft picks was the WWE Women's Champion at the time, Charlotte. And as most of you know, that is Ric Flair's daughter. She was picked number 3 overall as the Women's Champion, which I thought was a nice touch in the draft to make that championship seem important. And if you watched WrestleMania, they unveiled a new belt, got rid of the butterfly belt, thank goodness. Got rid of that ugly thing. And pretty much said, women's wrestling is back, which they kind of dropped the ball on a little bit. But at the last pay-per-view, Battleground, Charlotte and then this young lady right here had one of the better women's matches I've seen in a long, long time. And her name is the new WWE Women's Champion, Sasha Banks, the boss. She was fantastic in NXT. She's been great since she's been called up to the main roster. She has a good look. She's a really, really good in-ring worker. And one thing that I think is really cool about her is she's a student of the game. She watched as a young kid, even missed, I think, a family member's funeral to watch SmackDown. I mean, that's crazy to me. I've been a fan of this business for a long, long time. And I cannot say anything near to the effect that I've missed a family member's funeral, missed a family gathering even of any sort to tune in to WWE television, especially SmackDown. But that's the cool thing about Sasha Banks. She's a student of the game. She's a true fan of the business. And she won that women's championship at WWE Battleground on their last special event on the WWE Network. Like I said, those girls tore down the house. They pulled out every single thing they had. Both are extremely good athletes, very good in-ring technicians. Sasha needs to work on her promos just a smidgen. Maybe they just need to write her some new material. I'm not sure what it is. But she just needs to be a bit more natural behind the microphone. But her in-ring work speaks for itself. So that's some of your top stars drafted by the Raw brand. NXT call-ups for the Raw brand. And your one of the new, number one contenders, along with Seth Rollins, for the newly minted WWE Universal Championship, that is Finn Balor from NXT. He was the NXT champion for quite a long time. I believe the longest reigning NXT champion of all time. And also won a Fatal 4-Way. Yes, Fatal 4-Way, and pinned Rusev in the opening match of the first Monday Night Raw of the draft era. And then went on to beat Roman Reigns as clean as a sheet, ladies and gentlemen. Clean as a whistle. Whatever you want to call it, it's pretty clean. He did it with the 1-2-3 in the middle of the ring. But for him to beat Roman Reigns, who came off a little 30-day suspension himself, was a big statement. They're going to put this guy at the front of the line as a big star. So look for big things for Finn Balor. To me, if you've seen one Finn Balor match, you've seen them all. He basically does drop kicks, stomps, and chops, and strikes. You might see a Pele kick, sling blade, enziguri here and there, but guess what? Most of those are still versions of the aforementioned moves. So, as much as I'm not a huge fan of his in-ring work, he still manages to have really good matches and has a good persona, and has a fantastic entrance that I will not spoil. You'll have to probably watch that on SummerSlam, which I assume he will get his major entrance. Another NXT call-up for the Raw brand was Nia Jax. This is one girl who is a complete powerhouse, and although she has improved greatly, I don't think she's quite ready. We shall see how she adjusts with the fairly experienced women's roster on Raw. But Nia Jax coming up from NXT. And if I want to sort of give a rating for the first episode in that post-draft era for Monday Night Raw, I would give it a 9 out of 10. It had matches, important matches. It had character building. It had entertaining segments for the sake of actual entertainment. It felt like the 3 hours passed very quickly, which, for whatever reason, the last few months, 3 hours has seemed like it went forever. So tonight is going to be a very important night for Monday Night Raw to maintain that head of steam that they built last week. Looking at SmackDown, like I said, 2-hour show on Tuesday nights now, starting at 8 p.m. on the USA Network. Their top stars that they drafted: WWE champion Dean Ambrose. I'm kind of glad to see him away from the Shield. It gives him a little bit of time and a little bit of space to sort of mature on his own and give himself a little bit more of an identity. SmackDown roster is very top-heavy. It's not real deep, but it's very top-heavy. And with that said, with that said, the other superstars on SmackDown are John Cena, Randy Orton, who just came back off of 9-month little relaxing time, I guess you could say. Not really. He had shoulder surgery. But Randy Orton and the two stakeholders for the women's division on SmackDown are going to be Becky Lynch and Natalya. So the poor women's division on SmackDown, I won't even go into the names. You'll hear some of them in a minute from the NXT call-ups. But SmackDown, I thought, was slightly underwhelming on its first try. I was actually more excited for SmackDown of the two shows because they've been building that as the new show, per se. The newly rebranded, they're going to shoot it with different camera angles. They're going to have better storylines. They're going to have less authority figures. And then what we got was basically Monday Night Raw light. Or basically SmackDown semi-enhanced. I could not see a ton of differences considering the way that they advertised it. Some of the NXT call-ups from SmackDown. My favorite tag team currently, that's American Alpha. Chad Gable, Jason Jordan. Two guys that can work their flat behinds off in the ring. They are so entertaining. If you go back and look at footage from the Steiner brothers back in the 90s, I think these guys really sort of fit that type of bill where their in-ring work and their enthusiasm gives them character more so than them needing to talk. And both guys can kind of talk, but these guys are so much fun to watch. That's American Alpha. Couple of more call-ups here. Mojo Rawley, who was basically brought in to partner with Zack Ryder as the Hype Bros. Not excited about Mojo, to be perfectly honest with you. He's a great guy, it seems. If you've watched WWE Breaking Ground on the network, I came to have a lot more respect for Mojo. I dislike his character. He's kind of careless and sort of bull in a china shop in the ring, but I'm sure he'll be a great ambassador for the company if they give him that push. Alexa Bliss, who was probably my favorite of the women's call-ups from NXT, even more so than Nia Jax, she has improved so much in the past, I would say, 6 to 12 months. She slowly but surely got away from the tag team that she was managing at the time, Blake and Murphy, who are still down in NXT right now. But Alexa Bliss, now that she's turned heel, have this new attitude about her. If she's able to maintain a natural speaking ability on the mic rather than, here, read these words on a piece of paper type of promo, then, she's going to be really good. And Carmella, the former manager of Enzo and Cass, another one of my favorite tag teams. She is split from them. She's on a different show. She has been doing better on her own. I would have loved to seen her stay in NXT for another six months just to master her craft a little bit more and get used to being a singles wrestler away from Enzo and Cass. But I would expect her and Bayley to be good buddies whenever Bayley gets brought up to the big show. As I said, kind of a lackluster first show. I really hope they can recapture some sort of momentum that they got from the Tuesday night draft this week. And I hope that they're able to capture the audience and bring something a little different than they did last week. Because what they did last week, I don't think worked. I don't think it fell completely on its face, but it fell kind of flat. There was so much hype and not a whole lot of deliverance there. And with Monday Night Raw, there was a little bit less hype, and it over-delivered. So, we'll see how the shows go this week. Monday Night Raw tonight, Tuesday night, SmackDown Live tomorrow night. Both shows beginning at 8 p.m. on the USA Network. And you can find me live tweeting those shows on WrestlingInc.com and also on their Twitter at WrestlingInc. Again, ladies and gentlemen, I really want to thank you for joining us for this first inaugural episode of Knockdown Sports Radio. Remind you of our sponsors, 2H Brewing, at 2H Brewing on Twitter. Cody and his good friends giving the home brews a shot. I'll get you guys a list of their beers of the month. And of course, Wrestling Inc. as well. And if you want to sponsor Knockdown Sports Radio, you can shoot me an email at ccsportsmgt, that is ccsportsmgt@yahoo.com, or you can send us a line over at the show link, which is codyandchrissports@gmail.com. codyandchrissports@gmail.com. And as always, if you want to drop us a line on Twitter, that is now knockdown_sport. That is knockdown_sport. Hope you will follow us on there. We will be covering all sorts of sports throughout the Olympics, throughout these soccer friendlies, the international cups that are going on right now. Pro wrestling is going to be a main feature as always, and I will be syncing up some of my tweets from Wrestling Inc. to the knockdown_sport account. So I really hope you will join us and give us a shot here on Knockdown Sports. We appreciate your support and listening to us. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful week, and we will see you next week on Knockdown Sports Radio. Hope you will enjoy this tune from Rust Honey, appropriately named Down, on your way out. Have a great week. We'll see you next time. Chris Callicutt for Knockdown Sports Radio.